We're now going to build the graphical user interface for the tip calculator. Now, we've already gone ahead and created the tip calculator project. You can see that here. We've already removed from the layout folder the original main.xml, which we're about to replace. And we've already done one other thing as well, which is we've added some strings to the strings.xml file. And I'll just show it to you in XML format here. The app name string was created for us automatically when we built the project. And we removed the hello string that's also typically given by default as part of the strings.xml file. And then we created these additional strings that you saw in the graphical user interface when we were testing the app. So for example, we saw the words bill total showing up to the left of the bill total edit text, and then we saw the words tip, total, and custom showing up in several locations in the graphical user interface, and we saw the value 0 showing up in all of the edit text other than the bill edit text when we first started executing the app. Now, again, in general, you want to externalize your strings primarily for the purpose of being able to localize your app to other spoken languages. So by doing things like bill total, tip total, and custom in the strings.xml file, remember that we can create separate values folders for different locales, and Android is capable of automatically, or if you will, automagically, bringing in the appropriate set of strings based on the locale of the device on which the app is already running. So we'll use these existing strings as we configure the various GUI elements, and there were a few elements for which we did not externalize the strings. For example, you may recall in the GUI we had column heads of 10%, 15%, and 20% for the standard tip amounts. Those were hard-coded into the app, as was the initial 18% value for the seek bar's custom tip percentage. Now let me go ahead and close this, and let's start by creating the new layout. So we're going to right-click on Layout in the Package Explorer, select New, Other, and then within the Android category, Android XML file. And as we did previously, we're going to call this main.xml. It is a layout, and the reason we deleted the original layout and are creating a new one here is that we wanted to specify the root as a table layout. And of course, we could have just edited the XML directly, but by doing it this way, we let the IDE create the code, and we don't have any possibility of typos for creating the basic layout. Now, once again, it opens main.xml for me automatically, and you can see here that we once again have to reconfigure to specify the environment for which we're developing. So again, we're primarily using Android 2.3.3 for smartphone style apps in this video presentation, and sometimes we'll use the Android 3 or 3.1 for tablet apps in later lessons as well. Now, by default, the table layout has a black background, and it's set up to be called table layout. You can see that in the outline window here. And what we would like to do here is start configuring this. And one of the things we want is a white background. So if I select table layout, we can see the properties window show up down at the bottom here. And of course, we can scroll into the properties of the table layout, one of which is background, and we can set the value of that to white by doing #FFF and hit enter, and now we've got the white background here. In the next lesson, we'll actually show you how to use the predefined Android colors as well. By the way, we want the ID of our table layout to be table layout with a lowercase t, so I'm going to go ahead and set that. In case you didn't see what I just did, I right-clicked on the object in the outline and I said Edit ID. That allows me to edit the ID directly without having to go down to the Properties window, where I can also go ahead and edit the ID as well. And in fact, I just want to show you that it really did put that ID value in there. So let me scroll back to the left a little bit here. So at +ID table layout, it did that automatically for me when I edited the layout, the ID. So let's go ahead and just reconfigure a little bit here. Now, in this table layout, we would like to make sure that we have a little bit of spacing around the edges of the layout so that the GUI components are not abutting the edge of the device's screen, which just makes it look a little bit better to have that extra padding in there. So we're going to select the table layout and set its padding property to 5 dp, which says put 5 density independent pixels around the edges of the components that are inside this table layout, so no component will be closer than 5 density independent pixels to the edges of the screen in this layout. And then finally, there is one other thing that we're going to want to do. Just going back over to my diagram here of the graphical user interface. For the 3 rightmost columns, we want the controls in those columns to stretch to fill all available space in those columns, and this leftmost column will be only as wide as its widest element, which is bill total based on what you see on the screen here. Now you can tell a table layout which columns should be stretchable so that they can stretch properly, and you do that with the stretch columns property of the control. So let's go to stretch columns down here, and you can see if I hover over it, it says the zero-based index of the columns to stretch. So column 0 is the first column. We don't want that one to be stretchable. The way that we specify that column numbers 1, 2, and 3 should be stretchable is just 1, 2, 3. And if I hit enter and just show you that in the XML view here, you'll see that the stretch columns attribute was set to 1, 2, 3 in quotes. So we could do that directly in the XML, or as we've done here, we can show it to you directly in the properties window. So what we've done now is we've set up our table layout. It's a white background, 5 density independent pixels around the outside edges to prevent the GUI controls from abutting the edge of the screen, and we want our columns to be stretchable for column numbers 1, 2, and 3, which are the second, third, and fourth column respectively. Now the next thing we want to do is start adding our table rows to the user interface. And we can do that a couple of different ways. One is we can go to the layouts category here in the palette and drag table rows onto the design area or the outline, but we can also just right click the table layout in the outline and say add row, at which point it will create a table row. Now strangely, even though columns are numbered from 0, when you use this capability to create your table rows, they name them from 1. And for our purposes, so that we have kind of consistent naming between the rows and the columns, we're actually going to rename the table rows. Now let me first go ahead and add the 6 different table rows to the table layout. And then for each of these, like I said, you can right click, select edit ID, and we're just going to decrement, if you will, the names of these quickly by 1 for each of the table rows. And again, I'm just doing this for consistent naming with the columns as well, and also so it matches up those diagrams with those diagrams I showed you in the previous video. So let's just finish that up now. And finally, we have the last of the table rows. Okay, so we now have our 5 table rows. You can see if I click on any one of these, the properties for the table row down in the bottom right in the properties window here, and right now it looks kind of like they're all overlapping, so no matter which one I select, it just the design area doesn't really change at this point. Now, in terms of setting up the graphical user interface, we can actually build this pretty quickly by dragging and dropping items onto the GUI design area or onto the outline window. Now, in the first row of this graphical user interface, you'll recall from the GUI that we had a text view and we had an edit text. So I'm going to drag a text view over the design area, and now you can see the 6 different rows that are available to us, and it's kind of highlighting them in yellow. It's a little difficult to see on the screen, but if I let go of the text view now, it's going to be placed into table row 0, and we will see it also show up in the outline window here as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that, and notice that we see the text view up in the outline window as well. And to the right of that, we had an edit text. So if I drag that up over the text view and to the right of it, you see it's trying to highlight what is apparently a column within that row. If I drop the edit text there, it will also be added to that table row, or I can just drag it on top of the table row in the outline window, and it is going to be added to the right of the text view in the design area. Now, of course, those things are not named the way we want them for our graphical user interface, so I can edit the ID of each of these directly. In the first case, it's the bill text view, so I'm just going to edit that. And in the second case, it's the bill edit text, and let's go ahead and edit that as well. And you should name your controls as you create them so that they have the appropriate names for use in your application. Now, in the initial application, when it first came up and running, we wanted that edit text to be empty. So I can right-click the edit text and edit its text directly here, and just say to select a particular resource that represents what should be in that edit text. Or I can click it and go down here to its text property. And in this case, since I don't want to display anything, I'm just going to delete what was there and empty it. Now, unfortunately, that makes it impossible to see the bill edit text on the screen at the moment. For the text view, we wanted it to say bill total. And remember, we have in our strings.xml file the predefined strings. And I can, once again, select the text view by right-clicking and select edit text. And when I do that, I can then go ahead and select the appropriate string resource and click OK. And now we see bill total showing up in the graphical user interface. Now, for the next row, we had 3 text views representing 10%, 20%, or 15% and 20% column heads. So if I want, I can drag those right over the design area here, and again, you can see the different table rows, but sometimes it's just easier to know what you're doing by dragging it onto the specific row in the outline view. So in this case, let me just go ahead and drag 3 of them onto the outline view. Again, they get named by default, and you want to go ahead and change those names. So I'm going to edit the IDs on each of this. So we have the 10 text view, and then we have the 15 text view. Whoops. And finally, we have our 20 text view as well. And there we've named our text views. Now, it's not really laying out very well for me in the graphical user interface at the moment, but we'll fix that as we go through building the GUI. Now, each of these text views needs to have different text value in it, so we can select the text view and go down to its text property. And for this first one, we wanted it to say 10%, and again, we were hard coding these particular text views. Notice, by the way, when I select a text view in the design area, that it does not necessarily always select the appropriate one on the outline. The design implementation, or the design view implementation, has improved greatly over the last many months alone, and continues to improve as they release new versions of the ADT plugin. But sometimes it's easier to just select the control in the outline to make sure you're looking at the right set of properties. In this case, we want it to say 15%, so we'll go ahead and set that. And then finally, I'll select the last of my 3 text views. You can see here it did not update the properties window even though I selected it. So I'm going to go click on it up here in the outline, and let's change this one to say 20%. And when I press enter, you can see that we're getting the values here. So far we've got table row 0 with 2 items in it, table row 1 with 3 items in it. The columns are for these second and third columns being stretched. For the first column, it's only as wide as it needs to be at the moment. But we really have a 4-column layout, and the next row is the first one that has 4 items in it. And basically what's happening is the design area is dynamically updating based on what number of items I place in a given table row. Now for this next row, actually for the next 2 rows, both of them are going to have a text view and 3 edit texts. So I'm going to go ahead and drag those on. So you can see now it's highlighting the 3rd table row. When I let go, the text view gets placed there. And let's go ahead and drag 3 edit texts onto that row as well. Now you'll see that as I've done the 2 edit texts, I'm kind of running out of space here, but I can indeed drag all the way to the right of that last one, and you can see it's starting to highlight what looks like a column to the right of that. And I can't really tell for sure because of the way this is laid out that it's going to get dropped in the right place, but I can see in the outline window once I let go that indeed that last edit text is in table row 2. And by the way, notice that the other columns now got resized. Here our bill edit text is not 3 columns wide yet because we have to set its spanning attribute. And in the case of these 3 edit texts, they all have the same width. And remember, in all of the edit texts other than the bill edit text, we wanted to display 0.00 when the graphical user interface is first displayed on the running app. So it turns out that when you have 3 items, or any number of items I should say, of the same type, you can select them all to set a given property at the same time. So I'm going to click on edit text 1 here in the outline view. I'm going to hold the shift key and I'm going to click on edit text 3, and you can see all 3 of them are now highlighted. And now down here, anything that's common across those 3 controls I can set at the same time. And for all of them I want the text property to be set. And I'm going to click on the text property and use the ellipsis button to go select my 0 string for each of these, and now they're all updated to have the value 0. And we're going to set the text view here, in this case to have the string tip, and we'll do that by selecting the text view. And we need to do that in the outline window to make sure that it shows that particular object's properties down here. And for its text property, we'll use the tip string that we had pre-configured before we started this lesson for you. So now we've got this next row. If you want, you can actually copy a chunk of components and paste them as well. So if I right click here, you can see I can copy these 4 items that I highlighted. And now if I go down to table row 3 and say paste, I get a new table row. And within it I've got a text view and 3 edit texts, and again we need to rename them in this case. For the first one, we want its ID to be total text view, so we're going to say total text view, and we want its text not to say tip, but rather we want it to say total. So if I right click it and say edit text, I can get my resource chooser dialog, select total, and now my string is appropriate. And these other edit texts are displaying the correct value, but they're not named correctly yet. So let's go ahead and edit their IDs. So we have the total 10 edit text and the total 15. Whoops. Edit text, and then finally the total 20. And I just realized I forgot to name the edit texts for the previous row. And in fact, this one I named incorrectly here. So let's just fix that. Edit text. All right, so we have our total 10, total 15, and total 20 edit texts, and then we need our tip edit text to be renamed as well. So here we have tip 10 edit text. And notice that you can also right-click these items directly in the design area to do the same thing. So tip 15 edit text, and finally edit this ID, tip 20 edit text. All right, so we're trying to name our controls as we go here, and so far we've set up the first 4 rows of our table layout. We have 2 rows to go. In the next row we had a text view, a seek bar, and another text view. And I'm just going to stretch my GUI a little bit here so we can see the seek bar in the palette. So let's drag on to the next row, a text view, and then a seek bar, and then another text view. And we want to name these and set their text appropriately. In the case of the first text view here, we want this to be the custom text view. So I'm going to rename it to say custom text view. And we want to put the text custom in there as well. So let's go ahead and edit its text and select the custom predefined string resource that we defined for you. Again, if you just go to the strings.xml file that we provided with the original app, you can either copy the string resources into your project or you can just type these in yourself. And so we have the custom one configured correctly now. The seek bar is going to be called custom seek bar, so let's edit its ID. So custom seek bar. And for that custom seek bar, we're not going to be configuring the values of the range that's supplied by the seek bar, because by default it's automatically 0 to 100, but you can set those values via properties in the properties window if you want to. And then this last text view is going to be called the custom tip text view. So let's edit its ID. So custom tip text view. And for this one, it's going to initially show 18% when we first display the app on the screen. So let's go down to its text property and explicitly set that to 18%. Again, we could externalize the percent strings that you're seeing on the screen here, but these are never going to change for the 10, 15, and 20%, and the 18% we're going to programmatically manipulate in the actual Java source code for this app. So we've got 5 of our rows done now, and for the last row we had a text view, an edit text, another text view, and another edit text. So let's just go ahead and drag those onto the user interface in that order. And finally our edit text, and let's set these up correctly. So for this text view in the bottom left corner here, this is going to be the tip custom text view. So let's edit its ID. Tip custom text view, and its text is going to say tip, so let's edit its text by right-clicking, selecting edit text, and getting our tip resource. And the next edit text is going to be our tip custom edit text, so let's edit its ID. And then in this case we want its value to be 0.0, but we'll do that for both edit texts at the same time. This next text view, is a total custom text view, so let's change its ID. So total custom text view. And finally, for that one we want it to display total as the string, so we'll edit its text and select our total string resource. And then the last edit text here, let's rename this one as well. This is going to be the total custom edit text. And now we can select up in the outline window the 2 edit texts. If you select one and then hold the control key and select the other, we can see that both of them get selected, and we want their text properties, rather than saying edit text, to say instead the 0 string 0.00. So at this point we've got all of our GUI controls in the user interface, but there's a number of problems with what we're seeing here. One of the problems is the fact that some of the controls don't span the appropriate number of columns. So for example, this edit text at the top, we really want to occupy all 3 columns. Separately, we want this seek bar to occupy column numbers 1 and 2, so we want it to span 2 columns. We want these tip percentage amounts to be over the corresponding edit text, so we need to make sure that the 10% text view gets placed into column number 1, which is the second column, which will also force the 15 and 20% values to be moved over. And also we want the 18% text view to be in the right-hand column. When we make the seek bar span multiple columns, this text view will automatically get moved at that point. Another thing you'll notice is that the text view text is hard to read because it's in this light gray text. We're going to change the color of all of those text views, to black so that they're a little bit more readable. We're also going to do some other customization of these various controls, which we'll talk about in the next video.